Hey everyone. So I wanted to talk in this video about how to edit images that are shot in the box. Shooting in the box is one of my new favorite things to do. And the reason that I love it is the way that it shapes the light. So the setup for this light and image is a 24-inch deep umbrella with diffusion from Westcott. So it's a small modifier, not huge, but it's slightly deeper than your average umbrella, which helps to give the light more area to bounce through. So the light is shooting back into it. It is a white umbrella, and then it comes out through the front. It bounces out through the diffusion. And again, this is an FJ80, so it's a speed light. And I like it because it's sort of idiot proof. I've had so much trouble with other brands of flashes. I've had a Godox. I do have a Godox. I have a couple. I think I have a Sony somewhere, but I need to get that updated. I have a really old one. And so I need to get a new Sony flash. But anyway, this one just has really easy number system, very easy to function with my camera. And it just works. I like it. Big numbers, big numbers, 0 to 9 scale for power, and fairly easy to pair. That's the one thing that really drives me crazy with literally every flash and strobe is certain channels don't work in my house. Usually what you do is you set the flash to one channel, and then you set the trigger that's on top of your camera to the same channel, and they should just work. It never works for me. I have to go like A, B, C, D. And by the time I get to E, they connect and work. I don't get it, but whatever. Once you get that set, it's like plug and play. I leave the settings the same all the time. I leave the trigger set to the same setting. So it's power on the trigger, power on the flash, shoot. Like it's super easy once you get it set up. In this case, I had some fresh picked flowers from the garden. I go through and I deadhead every day. I used to like to do really big arrangements all the time, but it's been brutally hot here and I've been busy working with time lapses. And so I get a little burned out. And so I've just been kind of enjoying the flowers in the garden, but I do have to deadhead. So when I start to see that the roses are starting to wilt, I cut them off before they start to droop everywhere and drop their petals. And that's what this was. We have in this mix some Lady of Shalott roses, white snapdragons. This is one of my rogue ranunculus that actually lived. I've got some white sweet William, some pansies, yellow. I believe they are not Charlotte. I can't remember. Another really big rose here. Again, I don't know. All my David Austin roses got their tags buried when I planted them so that on the pretense that I wouldn't lose the tag, I buried it. So yeah, someday I'll know what it is when I take it up. But anyway, iceberg roses, I popped them in there in that really cool flower frog that I bought from the antique store the other day. Really big, like it's about the size of a saucer that would go under a teacup. It's pretty big for a flower frog. And then I have the light basically shooting across the front of the box. It's in front of the box distinctly. It's not like crossing over the box. It's in front of the box, but kind of perpendicular. So more or less a 90-degree angle to the front of the box. So if this is one, angle, 90 degrees would be coming out this way, and that's where the light is. Full power, 9. And then my settings are, I'm going to actually pick the correct image because I think I adjusted my settings so that this is what it looked like before I did any editing on one take. I have different takes where it looks differently, and we're going to go through that. So this was 50 millimeters at f16, something, I can't read it from this far away, 80th of a second, 60th of a second, somewhere in there, and ISO 320. So pretty bright, and this isn't where I wanted to go with it. This is a little bit better. And I think I was just moving the light farther away. I was getting more into that 90-degree angle. And you can see that it's a lot closer here than what I ended up having it be. I was just experimenting. And this is kind of where I left it. This is a true 90-degree angle next to the box. And it's the same settings. It's just me. Well, it's ISO 125. I think I lowered my ISO possibly. Oh, no. I think that's, yeah, I was up at ISO 400, ISO 320. I lowered the ISO to 125. So it wasn't like I was drastically changing the position of the light. It was just more the power of the light. By lowering that ISO, I darkened everything. But yes, 90-degree angle. And so this is kind of where I was happy. Of course, I'm still tilty. I know I can fix that in post, so I'm not too worried about it. I'm just more worried about giving myself space on either side to fix it. And then I started to play around here. Here's another pullback without it lit, so you can see how far away it is. Just pause the video if you are unsure. And that is where I started. And I'm going to go over to the develop module here and see what I did. So let's reset this. And you can see how poorly this is. But the very first thing I do with images like this is go down to transform, and I do full. And the hope is to straighten it up. And sometimes auto works better. In this case, neither. Then I go to crop. And I'm just trying to straighten things out as much as I can, you know, along the lines that are here. And then I want to determine what my crop is going to be. The box makes it necessary to choose a crop that is going to be printable and maybe doesn't show as much of the extraneous area outside the box. And so usually I've been liking an 8x10. I actually found a box that is pretty close to 8x10 all on its own. So I'm sort of excited about that. My father-in-law is replacing a missing piece in the box. It's kind of falling apart, and he is fixing that for me. So there's our starting point, pretty underexposed. I like it that way though, because I can see where the shadows are falling really obviously. The point of the box is to create shadows where there wouldn't be normally. It artificially creates flagging. Well, I mean, it legitimately is a box acting as a flag in various places. It's being flagged on this side, which helps craft the light. The flowers are more or less even with the front, that may be set back a centimeter or so, but they're really right up here, even with the front. And this is patterned after the Dutch master's inclination to shoot, or I should say paint, from outside of a window looking in. So the room inside the cottage or whatever would be very dark. The flowers would be set in the window. So you've got that inverse square law going on where the darkness falls behind them. And the frame of the window kind of serves as a flag because their windows were often deep. You know, they were dirt or adobe or whatever they built stuff out of, stones, depending on the type of structure that they make. They had very deep windows because of thick walls, and that produced the same kind of effect, this boxed in look. To edit, I just go at it really simply. I can either do one of two things. I can raise up the exposure on certain areas with the brush, or I can globally raise it up and then selectively darken. Usually what I want to do is just see what happens when I take a brush with my favorite whites, and then I just start to apply. And what this does is it keeps those shadows intact and starts to brighten up the areas that are important. I can also go in here and jump up with highlights as well, which starts to boost those whites while it also leaves the shadows intact. And that's really important to leave those shadows intact. If we start to work with exposure with all of this, we're going to have a mess. Exposure is going to brighten up the whole thing, and it's less targeted. What we're working with now is anything that's currently already white is going to be brighter. And that seems to work better. Now, because there are the dark shadows, we could bump up exposure just a touch if we needed to, just a smidge, because there's not a whole lot happening behind. It's very, very dark. One of the things that we want to avoid is sort of the decapitated look where you have like a floating blossom here. And so we want to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of what's happening underneath this blossom that's being hit and the rest isn't. So I might take another brush and go in with open shadows And what this does is it opens those shadows a little bit, gives us a little bit more definition, maybe a touch of exposure, not much. Maybe some whites, maybe some highlights. But we want to be careful not to overspill. Right here, I have definitely overspilled. And so I'm going to have to be careful and do subtraction with the brush and take it off of this flower that was getting wounded by the crazy exposure adjustment I was doing. And we're going to want to go in individually in all these areas. We could also use the object tool. So let's go to create a new mask and choose object, and then, swipe over the object and then raise the exposure on just that. I might go in and do another one here. A new mask, whoops, object. Maybe grab that leaf there. It didn't really do a good job. It didn't get the leaf, so that was not good. The thing about the object tool is the program has to see what you're trying to do. So let's go into object, make this smaller because it's really big brush. That could have been part of our problem. And then I'm going to just select this leaf here. And now I can raise the exposure on that a touch as well. And we can just go in and sort of give some identity to the bits that are super dark. One part that's really important to make stand out is the stem. So I could just, again, go into objects, make the brush really small, swipe down the stem, and then raise the exposure on that. Just enough to give it some sense of place. And you want to do that anywhere there's deep, dark shadows happening, which using this box is very typical. Now, I don't actually think there's anything here. Most of the leaves and things are headed this way. And so this is a genuine gap there, which is probably an artistic problem. I shouldn't have stopped where I did. I should have had something, greenery or something to throw in there. But a lot of times I'm working against the clock because as a deadhead arrangement, they're falling apart as I'm putting it together. So you just do what you can. I liked the openness of it. And then I noticed that this little guy down here, the pansies, were a bit on the sad side. You couldn't really see them. They felt a little bit like they were just sad. So I collected these dead heads from my pansy patch, and they're pretty. So adding a little bit of exposure to them balances the composition as well, makes them a little bit more visible. And that's pretty much it. I took it into Photoshop. I did my oil paint filter and sharpening that I do on everything. And then I went into exposure software and added the Kodachrome Old, which is my favorite filter, which you've seen me use at nauseum, so I won't bug you with that today. If you're interested in that, watch other videos because I do it over and over and over again. But that is it. And the box is one of my favorite new things to do. Thanks, everyone.